From my very first visit in the year 2000, I had wanted to hold a Eucharist, a worship service commemorating Jesus' last meal with his disciples in the slave dungeon of Cape Coast Castle. But I had never been able to get permission. So I was so pleased when finally I was able to arrange for such a Eucharist with our pilgrims from St. Paul's Church.
You could see the ocean beyond the walls, but also you could see the row of cannons that was on the wall facing the ocean.
It was kind of like a fort in the shape of a triangle. It had a door that faced right on the ocean so that they could walk the slaves right out and onto the boats. It was called the Door of No Return.
And so it's stark white, chipping, falling apart, but within the aspects of it is falling apart, it's very sound.
It was on a great setting. I mean, it's right there on the edge of the ocean and had a beautiful view. So they almost had like a patio area that you go out onto that overlooks the ocean. And there were fishing boats, so it was very scenic. And then you head down into the dungeons, and I think that's where it hits you, what it really was like.
I was a little nervous to see how I would feel and react, knowing what went on in the slave dungeon.
And we were led down single file, and it was a low ceiling, low tunnel.
But you go down this pathway, and every step you take, it gets darker, and it starts to get damp, and it starts to smell, and it's just, you descend into this darkness, and after 20 or 30 feet, you're in complete darkness.
We were walking in a single file going down, but there was an instant mood change. And I think in certain locations, when things like slavery takes place so specifically in this one spot, you can't remove slavery from it. This is the location of it. There's a definite air about it that you can feel. We were outside in the sun, like you said, taking pictures, looking at the people below us, looking at the boats, having excited, just a light mood. But the instant we walked in it, you could feel the importance of the site.
A location is so important as we worship, and the location of the men's dungeon is filled with horror. Literally, bone and hair matted into the walls where we sat on blankets and worshiped. But that very context gave gravity and an instant sense that what we were doing was participating in something that was happening not only right now, but in a mystical sense was happening over the centuries. We were one with those who had been in those dungeons, not by their own volition, but as part of the slave trade.
So we walked into the male dungeon, and there was a blanket on the floor and a guitar and a drum.
I remember we all sat in a circle and it was quiet.
And we really didn't quite understand where we were. I mean, we understood we were in the slave dungeon, but we didn't understand kind of the setting, in that it was that there was actually a mark on the wall where they had excavated the what we found out to be the remnants of the slaves. It was like 18 inches high.
It was small. There was little holes around the side of it where waste could go. It was sticky, it was just dark.
We had candles lit on the floor on a blanket, which we all sat on. We had a guitar, we had an African drum that Nate played. It was an incredibly intimate experience for us. And it was there that I shared with the pilgrims for the first time that I have a secret, that I'm an abolitionist. And you could see that, especially in that context, people wanted to understand, what does that mean?
Doug told us as part of his sermon, his first opening line was, I have a secret, I'm an abolitionist. And frankly, it was, it was like, what? When I first heard it, it took me a couple seconds to really kind of process what he was saying.
I was thinking, wow, is this like a secret thing? Like, like we're not allowed to talk about this? Or it just kind of hit me as like, is this something illegal like that he's talking about? And what is he abolishing? And
the first thing that struck me is, wasn't that what the Civil War was about? And yes, it was, but it didn't mean that it ended at that point. And we found out more about that later.
It was a really impactful sermon, and it changed the way I thought about human slavery.
When he told us that he was an abolitionist, it made me see the whole trip in a new light, because here he was traveling with us, and he was someone saving slaves.
Definitely eye-opening to hear that slavery, which before then I had believed was abolished, was still at large and bigger than ever.
There's no other experience than being there that I could describe how much I learned in that moment and just being immersed in that situation.
In our service, in that intimate gathering, were our pilgrims and the leaders, and our guide, Mr. Kojo Wood, as well as the curator for the castle. The castle is a World Heritage Landmark, and he commented that in all of his years there, he had never had a more moving experience than that time with us, celebrating Holy Eucharist in the men's dungeon. No one really wanted to leave that place, and we didn't quite know what life was going to bring when we stepped into the light again. But I think we all knew our lives would be forever changed.